Hello and welcome to Appalachian State University's Center for Academic Excellence Free Learning Conference 2019. And for folks who are not from the southeastern United States, we do in fact pronounce it Appalachian and not Appalachian, like Nevada, Nevada. My name is Darrell Laws with the Center for Academic Excellence, and I will be here to help troubleshoot any Zoom technical issue you may have throughout this session. So please note that as a participant, your onboard video and audio have automatically been muted. So for any Q&A, please feel free to scroll down to the lower left-hand corner and unmute either your audio or video channel, or simply send a chat by scrolling over to the chat icon. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Oakland University's Shaun Moore and Christina Moore and their presentation, How Video Conferencing Engages Learners for Each Other and Beyond.
Thank you. I will start out by saying that I have mispronounced Appalachian with Appalachian, at least today in my entire life. But
yes,
otherwise,
I appreciate that clarification.
I will get it right. Okay, so I'm guessing, I think Darrell can only verify, but Darrell, can you verify that you can see our screen here?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And hopefully a few more people will be dropping in as we go through here, but you can see our video here. I am Shaun Moore, and this is Christina Moore, my wife, and here are some of our qualifications here. You see us now here in my basement office, or what I refer to as the Dragon's Lair for some unknown reason. And that is because our babysitter was sick today, so we're going to be in the office, but now we are in the home office instead. So you get a little bit of our home office view from this. So we're going to be talking today about how video conferencing engages learners with each other and beyond. And so here's a picture of us. This is my wife and I and our two kids, our son Hawthorne and our daughter Zora, right in front of Oakland University. That's the library we work at. So I am the director of e-learning at Oakland University. And
I'm the virtual faculty developer at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. So I develop the professional development that we provide in an online format.
We are both alumni of Oakland University. We've been there for quite a while. I've actually been there since 2001 as an employee, and you've been there since 1989?
Yeah, it feels like it hardly left.
Okay, there you go. Maybe not that long. So we want to start off by having a little audience participation. So if you will open up a browser tab and go to this bit.ly, you can just type in bit.ly. And this is case sensitive. Oh, that's right. Thank you. I'm going to copy and paste this. This is going to be a better way to go about it. Just copy and paste this into the chat, so I don't have to worry about telling you to type things in. There you go. All right, in the chat. I'm sorry here. That went privately. Let me just try that again. There we go. All right, so in the chat, you should see that bit.ly URL. You can click on that to bring up that document.
It'll be a handy way for us to look at your responses to some questions to get us thinking about how we've collaborated online in general and how we've used video conferencing specifically, both professionally and if you are teaching with your students and teaching them how to collaborate online. And then this can serve as a handy takeaway as well, so that you have these notes for later on.
So if you want to start jumping into that document there, like I said, you can click on that link in the chat window and let us know in the chat if you're not able to see that, or if you're not able to get that up. And what we're going to do when we have that there is we're just going to kind of get some feedback from you with these beginning questions before we dive into it. We want to just get a little bit of audience feedback on if you've used web conferencing before and what sort of virtual collaboration tools you've used. Okay, sorry, we're going to change that permission. Yep, turn that off right there.
It says only specific.
Yep, here you go.
Sorry, I thought I had that.
Okay, we have changed that. If you refresh that page, sorry about that. Go ahead and refresh your page, and we have that sharing should be set correctly now.
We see some anonymous animals, so we're on the right track.
All right. So we basically have 4 questions on this page, and they'll already be on the Google document. I have them here on the presentation, but they'll be right there on the Google document. So as I'm kind of rambling through this, feel free to start typing some of your responses in there. If you've used web conferencing, virtual conferencing tools before, why or why not? What tools you have used, or you've had your employees or students use. And basically we have a few questions after that of what has worked well for you and what challenges did you face. So we won't take too long. We'll give you a couple minutes here, just start to type some things on there. And I'll put that URL back up there again. Once again, you click on that in the chat link. So go ahead and just start typing some answers in there. And if you've never used Google Doc in such a way that you're seeing everyone collaborate at the same time, this can be a fun way to see how this all works. If you're on the same line as someone with Google Doc, you can just hit enter to go down to your own line, and so you're not typing on the same line there as someone. If anyone has jumped in late, I think you should still be able to see the chat, but I'll put this in here again. We are using this document. I just put the link to in the chat. Just answer a few of these questions to get us started. And this document, by the way, will be available for you afterwards too, so you want to refer back to this and see what other people have said. This will also give us a way to situate where you all are starting out with and how we'll show you from here what we're doing.
I think my favorite Google Anonymous animal is the chupacabra. I think the chupacabra is here.
Let's see if we have. Yep.
Oh no, that's something different. Capybara, I've never heard of that one.
They're wonderful. in Las Vegas at the what is it? It's like an animal place you can go to, and they actually have them where you can go up and pet them and play with them.
Oh,
really?
wow.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
So I'm guessing they're small.
No, they can get pretty large actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go back up to number 3. Okay. Page to number 4 too.
We'll give you 1 or 2 more minutes here to finish up this, some of your comments here, and then we'll just quickly discuss these before we move on.
Keep going, number 4.
Okay, looks like we've kind of come to a little lull in the typing. So I'll make just a few comments about this as we're going through here. So you can see that information right here, what people have used before: Skype, Zoom, used for online classes, office hours. We'll talk about some of these examples too. And as we're going through and talking about some of these examples as well, you can feel free either in this document or in the chat here in Zoom to add some of your experiences as we have that as well, because we're, of course, giving you our perspective. We'd love to hear your perspective more about that too. Zoom, Skype, Google products. Yeah, we're looking at those: Skype, Google, Adobe Connect, Blackboard Collaborate, WeChat. Yeah. Writing presentation design. That's an interesting way. live instruction, library instruction. So some of the things you said work well. Breakout rooms for article discussion, yeah, that can work very well. Some people might say that's also one of the downfalls, that you can have some trouble with breakout rooms. It depends on how it works for you. Engaging students synchronously is a wonderful thing. Students see each other in Zoom, right? No account required for Zoom, that's good. Okay, so let's look at some of the challenges. Video conferences in language classroom. That's interesting. I have a French background, so I'm always interested in how we can get some of our language learners. As the director of e-learning, I'm always interested in how we get some of our language teachers to use this more, and I figured virtual conferencing software would be great for that. So you're saying challenge to keep both face-to-face and distance students engaged. Yeah, and I think that could be tricky if they're not in the same area, and so it's as opposed to like not having them all on there. We're not really going to talk about it in this presentation, but if you haven't heard of a tool called Kubi, K-U-B-I, that's something interesting you might want to look into. It's basically a robotic neck that you attach like a tablet, and it holds it there, and you can move it around here. Well, actually, we will have one reference of it at the end. Yeah, I apologize. And so that's something you might look into as well. That's if you have face-to-face students, you want to bring a few distance students into it. That can work a little better. Technology challenges, yes, there's always going to be some technology challenges. That's one of the trickiest things I think about virtual conferencing software, is that there's more functionality, more things that can go wrong. Scheduling, all right, I think we will talk a little bit about scheduling if we're doing that. And scheduling virtual collaboration. All right. Yeah, so some good takeaways from that. We'll be able to address a lot of these things as we go through here. So I appreciate your feedback. As you're thinking of some things, you can feel free to add to that document as you go on, or once again, add to the chat here.
And then just one more note. So I saw that Anonymous Kangaroo started to comment on the last section here, which is just a general catch-all section on sharing takeaways or remaining questions that you have. We're hoping to have some time at the end to address that in general. So if at any point during our presentation you think of things that you'd like to share or cover, good tools, please feel free to share them there.
Excellent.
So why video conferencing? So our team, Shaun is definitely the one who works with faculty and has a lot of technology expertise, where I come from this more as someone who is researching online collaboration and how we can best prepare our students for the online collaborative situations that will arise in their careers. And through my research and figuring out how to best prepare students for this type of work environment, themes of video conferencing kept coming up directly or indirectly. So I wanted to boil that down into 5 basic arguments that we're making on why it's worth focusing on video conferencing rather than just online collaboration in an asynchronous or only text-based format. So first, students really need this skill in their prospective careers. And video conferencing builds empathy and understanding that often isn't there in just online collaboration otherwise. And video conferencing, looking at our students' side, improves learning community, and then it increases all of our learning and professional opportunities and can make our classes more inclusive and interactive. So I first want to focus on these first 2 in reviewing the literature on the type of online collaboration work that our students are getting into in their future careers. So first, looking at their needs. The literature finds that students, when they first graduate from their courses, this is based on a Gallup survey of over 1,000 recent college graduates, they report about 86% reported that they actually use quite a bit of technology in their classrooms. But in most cases, they said that it didn't fit the technology that they actually used in their careers. So there's a bit of, it wasn't congruous there. Another need is the fact that student comfort with technology does not always translate into how they apply that into an academic or professional work context. So this is getting back to the idea of sort of debunking a little bit the idea of the digital native that a lot of us or a lot of the faculty we work with might have of, oh, they're so used to technology, they'll be able to use it really well in their classrooms to collaborate with each other really well. And that's not always the case. Sometimes they need to formally connect how their comfort with technology can be used in a way that's really productive in those settings. And then in reviewing the literature on the struggles of online collaboration, both in an online learning format and in a work format, there were 3 reoccurring themes in both of those bodies of literature. And one was the challenge of asynchronous communication. It's probably the online collaborative strategy that we rely on the most, but we all have those dreaded 30-message email threads where we say, oh, this should have been a phone conversation that took 5 minutes because we were trying to do it in this way that was just very time-consuming. And then we also might find in those threads that there's a feeling of reported uncertainty among students and coworkers. You're not sure if you've been understood, or you're not sure if you're understanding what your collaborator is getting that. And that can lead to a lot more time and confusion later down the line. And this can lead to challenges of cultivating empathy. So students and coworkers reported struggling themselves and with others to feel a sense of empathy and humanity that comes with all of that nonverbal communication that you experience in a face-to-face format. So bringing this back to video conferencing and how it meets these needs, one of the top reported technologies that students said they wished they had started using more in their classes was video conferencing specifically, because they used it so much. I know in my courses I was hearing a lot of businesses using WebEx as well. I know we have a lot of Zoom users, and I really like Zoom, but our institution currently uses WebEx. And additionally, so one example of being able to take students' comfort with technology and get them to connect that to how they could use those skills in their academic and professional work, video calls is a really good example of this. So we might have students in a face-to-face classroom, but if they're doing group projects, they're likely going to have to collaborate a lot outside of that class space, and a lot of that will take place online. So we should really be challenging students to think about the ways they should make sure they're cultivating understanding by not just using email or text threads, but maybe using video calls as well. And that leads into this one. I think video conferencing really helps meet a lot of the challenges in online collaboration that are cited in the literature, because it's instantaneous, it's embodied, you're reacting and forming meaning synchronously and based on how you're seeing people reacting to the point you make or the confused look they have on their face. And it's personable. It helps build empathy. So as far as a literature review of online collaboration, that basically is the root of the first 2 here. And we'll get more into these other 3 points about learning community, increased access to opportunities, and just more inclusive environments when we walk through some tools and some examples.
Thank you. All right, our experiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of our experiences. First of all, I have just up here some video conferencing tools. So there's free and paid, although the paid version on that right-hand side, a lot of those have a free version that you can use for them. Even WebEx and Zoom, Collaborate might have a free, like 2 or 3 person room you can use for those to even test them out. So that's something to keep in mind. Usually the free versions don't have any recording or anything like that available, but it might still have some of those nice features of doing that, getting that synchronous learning going on. So you've probably used, and I can see from the document that we shared with you all that you have a lot of these on there, like Zoom and Skype, the Google products, and Adobe Connect we have on here as well. So Google Meet is one of these Google products that we talk about. Oakland University uses Google for our email system, and so if you do that as well, if you have the Gmail for your email system, you'll have some of these things built right into it, like the Google Calendar, which we use all the time. So recently Google Hangouts has turned into Google Meet, and we actually use this quite a bit. So we have, as Christina said, we have WebEx for our main virtual conferencing software. We're using Zoom right now, and for this conference, and a lot of institutions that I work with use Zoom as well. It's a very popular one. Those are usually the paid versions of it. And we still use Google Meet quite a bit, that free version of it. And basically some of the differences that we have on there is that those paid versions, usually you do things like the biggest things is going to have recordings on this. You can actually record the session, which depending on what you do, that might be a very big thing. If you have a class you want to go through and you want them to be able to see it later, recording's nice. If you're using it for things like virtual office hours, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you probably don't want to record it so people can see it. So maybe recording is not a big deal. So that's one of the differences with those paid versions. And usually it's another difference is the access. So for those paid versions, you might be able to have 1,000 people or more into a sessions, do breakout rooms, things like that. For the free versions like Google Meet, you can have up to 25 participants in, which is still a decently big size. But if you have a 40-person class, for example, it's not going to work for you. So I use Google Meet for some quick little things because I can set it right up in the right up in my email. You can actually set up a calendar event and add it on there, and add that scheduling with it. So it's very nice and easy to go through with that. But once again, it doesn't have recording. So I'll use that for things that I just want to do a quick little meeting with someone. It might be a couple people, might be one-on-one, face-to-face, that type of thing that I would normally do face-to-face, I should say. And I'll use Google Meet for that. Whereas if I'm doing something for the classroom where I need to record it, I'm going to use one of my paid versions for it. So your institution most likely has some sort of paid version. I don't think anyone that doesn't have something like this at this point in time now. Usually it's tied into your learning management system or your LMS, which is nice. So you can schedule some meetings, some sessions there, and then it'll go right into the virtual conferencing software. But there are also these free ones that you can think of and play around with. Even if your institution does not use Gmail or Google services for your email address, you can still use your outside Gmail account, or just create an outside Gmail account, and then you can use things like Google Meet. It is nice if your institution does use it, because then you can use it. I use it for like group projects for my students, for example. I can tell them they can use Google Meet for it. I won't go too deep into this, but this is Google Meet right here. Meet.google.com is the website you go to itself. You can see over here that I'm logged in as my Oakland University email here. And there are phone apps for these. And in fact, really on almost all of these you have here, there are some apps that you can get for smartphone and tablets as well. So you may not have known that or used these before, but you can also use these. You don't have to have a full computer to use them. You might get a slightly different experience when you have that with it though. So I won't go through this starting a meeting. When we do this live, we usually show people the starting a meeting, but we're already in a session right now, so it might confuse the cameras if we start to do that here. But it's a very simple setup where I can start these different sessions here, and it gives me a little code that I can invite people to. Just like Zoom, you can turn on and off your webcam, you can have a chat there, so it's very similar. I can share my screen. It has a lot of those same features built right into Google Meet. So you haven't used that before, that's a decent one to check out and a free one to try out with.
Just one point before we move on. I would just emphasize I really am a proponent of having one of each of these tools in use and getting familiar with it, because on the free side, there may be some, and I would also communicate with your students as well. And I actually have an article in Tech Trends where I discuss this a little bit more, and it's referred to in the references at the end. But it can be really useful to have students walk through the process of telling you, what video call apps do you use most, especially if you are having your students work in groups, even if they don't have any online component formally. You might find out they use Hangouts, or they use something that you're not as familiar with. And depending on how your group work goes, it might be fine for them to use whatever works for them, or you might consider as a class if there's something else you should use. So going back to one of the comments in the first 4 questions we went over, the free version is normally super easy to access, and it's nice to have that tool. Whereas having the paid version, you're able to do something a lot more robust. And in any case, it's really useful for your students to be used to switching between 2 different ones as well, so that they have the experience of like, okay, I generally know what I'm looking for in this software, even if I'm not super familiar with it. So I would recommend at least kind of having 2 tools that you're familiar with.
And I'll just mention, I won't go through each with these here, but I'll just mention here this on this free side, the fourth one down, FaceTime. Almost all of you probably heard of FaceTime for like the iPhones and the Apple phones, where you can do that video calling. Android phones have something called Google Duo, which is the same exact thing. So if you've never heard of that, Google Duo, you can do that same exact thing that you do with FaceTime with an Android phone or an Android tablet, for example. And Slack, this very bottom one, once again, I won't go too far into this because it'll get us way off topic, but Slack is, if you've never heard of Slack before, it's basically kind of a mix between email, forum, chat, message, that sort of thing. And our university uses it quite a bit. Our department uses it quite a bit for different talking back and forth between our employees. But it does have the free version of Slack, which we use, does have the ability to do a one-on-one video call built into it. So that's why we have that in here as well. Okay, and as we're going through this, of course, if you have any questions or any points, feel free to throw that into the chat session, and we're monitoring that as well. We can get that up there. So let's talk a little bit about some of these specific uses. So we're going to first look about using this in the classroom. So we had some of these examples that people had talked about this here. There's different ways that both Christina and I and our colleagues have used virtual conference softwares in the classroom. So one of them is doing things like instructional videos. A lot of these, as we mentioned, you can record on it. So if you're doing an online class or a blended class or even a face-to-face class, you might be away at a conference and missing a session, you don't want to miss it. You can use some of these tools to create different instructional videos. You're recording your different lectures. There are other tools that you can use for this, and there are specific lecture capture tools or different video capture tools like Camtasia that some might argue are better for it, and that may be true. It depends on the case where you're doing it, but not everyone has access to those tools. And especially maybe where you're at, if you're traveling abroad or you're out of state and you're at a conference and you want to quickly record something, this might be the only access you have, and you can still get a decent video out of that as well. So that's one of the potential uses for this. Virtual student office hours. I've actually used this quite a bit, and I've had some good success. I wouldn't say it's overwhelming because almost like my regular office hours, I don't get a lot of students that show up to it. But when they do show up to it, it works very well. And in my mind, certain times it works better than my actual office hours. And the reason I say this is that students might come to your office hours, and maybe you can relate to this. They might say, well, I had this issue with this paper, this assignment, and they don't have anything with them. They didn't bring anything. They're just kind of talking. And I'm like, would you have it? And they're like, no, I didn't bring it, or whatever else. If I'm on my computer and they're on their computer in virtual office hour and they're talking about something, just like we're here, I can say, all right, go ahead and bring it up. Share your file with me, do whatever else. Or I can share my screen. I can pull up our learning management system. We use Moodle at Oakland University. I can pull up Moodle, pull up the gradebook, show them some things. And so usually I don't have that back and forth of, well, I have this issue, but I don't know what it is, or I don't have my example with me, that type of thing. So it's really nice to do those virtual office hours with something like this. Student groups and meetings, I touched on this a little bit before. When you have, and once again, a lot of these that I'll be talking about, I think work great in online classes, but they can really work in any modality because I teach online and face-to-face. And it's even nice in face-to-face classes because you might not have a lot of time in class to work in groups. Then outside of class, who knows what they're doing outside of there. We have most of our students are working full-time at Oakland University. So it's nice to have these available. For a lot of these tools, you can set it up so that the students can use them themselves. The teacher doesn't have to be present, so they can use them just to talk about whatever they're doing. If they're doing teamwork, if they're doing collaborative paper, anything like that. These are wonderful tools to have the students available. So they're not just texting each other or sending 20 emails back and forth like Christina mentioned. It's a great tool to have available for them.
Can I jump in for a second? Yeah, I was going to address this question from Catherine about how you manage if multiple students, sort of show up for virtual office hours. Since this was facilitated online, how I did is since we do have Google-powered email, I used Google Appointments and asked my students to sign up for a time slot within those hours. So that becomes just a way for students to see what times are available. And it also gives students a chance to sort of describe in that appointment, this is what I'd like to meet to talk about in case I need to prepare anything beforehand. So that was the way that I managed that.
Thank you. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I keep saying that, but if you haven't used this before for Google, it's a wonderful thing. You can click anything on Google and make an appointment slot. And inside of that, students can, well, basically when they click on it, they'll see this page itself. I have mine set to wait 2020, so it's not showing that. But here's the appointment slots here. and they'll see the different appointment slots here, and they can click on that and they can book it right on your calendar. So you can set up a whole bunch of potential appointment times on there, and they can book those as well. This also was, there was questions here about, or some of the people talked about scheduling virtual or collaboration can be tricky. Students can also do this as well. They can set up different appointment slots, or you can set up things for students. I'll do this when I'm doing a full online class where I have students going on with different groups to present. I'll bring up a week and set up a lot of different appointment slots and let them choose what works for their team, and then I can go through that way. So this is a wonderful way to go about that. And while I'm here, I'll just show this real quick. When I go into a meeting itself, if you're using, once again, Google Calendar, you can add Google Hangouts as one of the conferencing, and it'll automatically grab a URL for that as well. So that's a few nice things. Once again, if you have Google built into it, you can add those things right with it.
But yeah, I agree with Damiana, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, of it's not too often a problem where I have, students piling in at the virtual door. I wish that was a problem I have more often. But that is a good point, that just like in face-to-face office hour situations, it can sometimes be beneficial if more than one student shows up and you have more of a small group format.
Right. It depends, obviously, of course, on what they're talking about. If one student's breaking down crying, I might not invite other people in.
Not as a group.
What I've done before, especially, so if I'm using a more robust tool like Zoom, you can ask students to leave. You can actually kick students out. In some of the free tools, you may not be able to kick them out, but you can see who's here, just like we can see our participants here. And so you can see if someone else joins up, you can say, all right, I'm sorry, Jim, we're talking to Gary right now, so if you can jump back in here in a minute, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as we're seeing here, I haven't had a giant influx of people amazingly come see my virtual office hours, but I'm ready for that. It's good to be ready for that type of situation for when you do get more popular than I am.
Mm-hmm.
Individual and group conferencing, we've done things before where we want to meet up with our students to do things like talk about one of the papers. We both taught composition before, and we want to say, all right, we're going to have a conferencing meeting with them to talk about the paper. It could be really any type of thing they have for the class. And we've used our virtual meetings. It's very similar to an office hours, for example, that you have there. Same thing for optional review sessions they have. What we've done before is we've said, all right, on Tuesday night, I'm going to go online and I'm going to do an optional review session because we have an exam coming up or a big paper or whatever it is, presentation. And I'm going to go over some of these points. And sometimes we'll offer some extra credits for that. But usually what we'll do is we'll do some review sessions. Those students who are there live can have the benefit of asking questions when they're there, which is nice. We'll record it so that students, if they weren't there, they can see it. But using a virtual conference for those optional review sessions is nice as well. If they're optional, you're just showing it and recording it. You don't have to worry about getting everyone on the same page if they can work for that time. Student virtual presentations. If anyone's done this before, feel free to share it in the chat room. I've done this before just a little bit here and there. In face-to-face classes I teach, if students have presentations and then I move that class to online, I still want them to do these presentations. And so I will actually do that. They'll do presentations in a virtual conferencing software. And I've had some good luck with this. What I do to try to make it manageable is I'll have them present in a group. And this way, if I have 20 or 30 students in the class, I'm not trying to figure out 30 different presentations. I might have 4 or 5 different groups, for example. And then there's where I'm trying to get everyone on the same page with it. So it's a little easier. And one of the things I've done is I don't make everyone show up to every session because they really can't. I have a lot of times I use those Google appointments to say, here's some times that you could present at. And I'll choose a week where I have just a lot of options available to them. And what I'll do is I'll say, of course, they have to be ready. They have to be ready to present with their group, but also they have to attend at least one other group's, whichever ones of the 4 or 5 that are available, their presentations and give some sort of comments as they go through. So that's something to do. And if anyone's ever done that, feel free to share your experiences. Guest attendance is another wonderful thing. And this mainly is, well, I guess I shouldn't have to say this is for online classes because it'd be face-to-face as well. If you have someone like, maybe we have colleagues from all over the world here in our session right now, and you might be making some friends with people, or you might have some colleagues in a different institution. You might say, I'd love for you to talk to my class about this one topic. Before, what they might have done is maybe send you an email or maybe make a video for you, something like that. But you can use a virtual conferencing software. It's an online class. You can all meet up. If it's face-to-face, you can just bring it up in the classroom there. And you can have some guest lecturer that comes in and talks about it. So it's another nice way of using the virtual conferencing system in your classroom. These are a few examples. If anyone has any other things that they've done, feel free to share that in the chat and we can get some of those examples going.
And I'm actually experiencing this more as a student right now. I'm a doctoral student at our institution, and one of our instructors always offers just as an open opportunity that if students can't attend the on-campus session, that video conferencing in is always an option. And it's not a perfect option. There isn't normally the video element there. They're just normally listening in, which takes away from the presence a little bit. But especially since my fellow students are almost all working professionals and many have families, this is something that has been really important to us as far as inclusivity and access. It's not perfect yet because, you know, as is in one of the takeaways here about the struggle of really catering to both the audience online and face-to-face when you have both of those synchronously. That's still a challenge, but it's a really good first step that that's a consistent option available to us as doctoral students. And guest attendance as well. One of our instructors had a guest speaker almost every class session, which was weekly, and it really brought a new voice to our class.
Right.
So I think is the next, yeah. So this is just one more in-depth example of how this actually played out. So what you're seeing here is an example from one of my student groups a while back. So this is a fully online course teaching writing and rhetorics. Specifically, it was one of those introductory research courses where students are learning how to basically conduct more scholarly research. And so what you're seeing here is a Google Doc where students have been building a research proposal of a group research project they're going to do. And this shows kind of a snapshot of everything. So this is actually a recording done in WebEx. I record these group meetings in case one of the group members could not show up at this time or something came up, so that it's there to consult. And then what I'm doing with the students here is going through their proposal. I might be leaving them comments based on something we're talking about so that they can follow up on that later, or they might be doing the same thing. But we're all in this document and we're meeting you know, through WebEx. And I'm actually troubleshooting with a student in this chat box. So it's nice to sort of practice and think through the situations that could happen in case students are having issues with their technology. So here I knew that even if the student wasn't able to use the audio, that they had a synchronous text option available. Whenever I do, based on the research I've done and what I've practiced, I always try to turn on my video camera, and I encourage others to do so as well. But I don't force it. You know, you never know where students are, how they feel about that. But I do at least encourage it for the reasons that I went over earlier today. So this is just one screenshot of that.
So we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about video conferencing in more of an academic career. So this is going to be thinking more of like a staff type of position, or even faculty working with other faculty, that type of thing. So we look a little bit more at the classroom side of it. There's also other ways that you can use this here as well. So for my position as Director of e-Learning, I had a phone interview, but it was actually a web conference interview. We used WebEx at my university, and that's how I did my first interview. And I've had a lot of luck with that, and I think it's a little bit nicer than just that phone interview that we've done in the past. I don't know if anyone's done that, feel free to have more of a web conferencing, not a phone interview. Feel free to share that information with us. But it gives you a little bit more information because you still don't have to have the person fly in from wherever they might be. They can still do it from wherever they're at, but you can see them, you can have them share other things, they can give a quick little presentation. You can do a lot more than just kind of talking around the table on a phone. So it adds a little bit more to that. Meetings and committees, we talked a little bit about this already. I said in my group, we use Google Meet for the different weekly meetings that we do for my team in e-learning. And so this is a wonderful thing to do. For different committees I have, so I have, like, for example, an e-learning advisory committee that we have at Oakland University, and we'll have those meetings once a month. And every single one of those, much like Christina said, where her professor does, where she'll offer them to either come to campus and be in the classroom, obviously, or they can join remotely. I'll do that with my committee meetings. So if they can't make it to the actual library we work at, they can join it via WebEx. And I use WebEx for that because we record those different committee meetings. But this has worked out very well. We usually get 2 or 3 different people faculty members who are on the committee that can't come to campus, or they, it's just not convenient for them because we have it on Fridays, that they'll join up via WebEx. So that's worked out very well. Things like telecommuting, if you're working at a distance, that type of thing. This works obviously very well. You can communicate with your colleagues like this. You can jump into different meetings with it, just as if you're there in the office. So it's nice to be able to jump back and forth and be a part of that team with it. Workshops and trainings, you guys record everything that all your workshops that you do, right?
Yes, and that's especially why I'm still thinking through, the challenge of facilitating the workshop for the people in front of you, but also making it something that is engaging for the online audience as well. But yes, we do, and we do try to include the online audience as well.
So if you're doing, right, so I work at the e-learning office. Christina, she said, works at the Teaching and Learning Center. And so we do different workshops for faculty to show them all kinds of different things, pedagogy, teaching pedagogy. And so almost all of our workshops we will record and also have them available that they can either join online to see them synchronously or view them afterwards. Webinars and conferences, this where we're at right now is a great example. We are at a virtual conference right now. And so I've done these things before. You've probably all been to different webinars, things like that. You might have even hosted some yourself. They're very nice. And with these technology, it's pretty easy to do. Of course, as we saw in some of those things, anything can go wrong with these technologies. Sometimes the camera doesn't go wrong. If you don't have a great connection, things can go wrong. So it's good to have some backups for things like that. I don't know that we mentioned this yet, but when we have students do this or we go through this, we always do some sort of test session beforehand. So if they're doing some sort of presentation online, things like that, depending on the tool they use, they might be able to set this up themselves. But we always say, before you do this, make sure you go into this test session, make sure you're going to be at the computer you're going to be at the connection you're going to be at. So if you're going to be at a wireless connection at your home or something like that, be at the same setting you're going to be at, try to make sure you can connect, make sure everything works out, and you can deal with that as you go through. Hopefully at your school, you have a department that's something like my department, the e-learning department at Oakland University, does all the tech support for this. So if a faculty has any issues, staff member using it, students have any issues, they don't have to worry about themselves. They can call our office and they can work with that. So that's nice too, because usually what we tell faculty is, tell your students to do a test run of this, give them this link, they can do a test run. If they have any issues whatsoever with it, contact us, we'll get all that worked out, make sure that their microphone, their camera works, all that other things, and they don't have to worry about it. So that's something that we do highly recommend. Scholarly collaboration. I've actually done this quite a bit and a little bit more recently since I've been working with colleagues at a few other institutions. And we've been doing things like doing research together, writing papers together. And we couldn't do anything like this without these types of tools because we're states apart. And we'll jump on these every once in a while. We actually use Slack for our communication, which I think is easier than email because it's a little bit more immediate with that. And we use a virtual conferencing software. Usually we use Zoom. And we'll meet up and we'll talk and find out where we're at, use some Google document to share it. So there's so many of these different tools now that make this available, but this is wonderful for that type of scholarly collaboration. And of course, it doesn't have to be across the nation. It could be some faculty at your own institution. We have different buildings that are quite a ways apart, and in the winter, people don't want to leave their buildings. And so this can work out very well. The last one I talk about is kind of a big one, online student services. So as the director of e-learning at Oakland University, one of my big goals a few years back was to make sure that we had all our student services that we have offered to regular face-to-face students available to our online students, which at the time was not the case. And as I met with the different areas, the different staff members that did these different student services like tutoring, advising, that sort of thing, at first they thought, well, this is impossible. We can't possibly do this besides saying, we offer it via phone and so it's available online, which to me is not the same thing. But what I told them is that they could use either WebEx or something like WebEx, like Zoom, whatever else, or Google Meet, which are already free, built into our system. And they can do the same thing you're doing, but they can offer those student services to students online. And so basically what we did is we met with the different areas and showed them this. We offered a bunch of different workshops and we showed them how to use this and we trained them how to use this. So these virtual conferencing software tools have allowed us to bring those services into a different setting. And it really benefits not just, of course, the online students, but it might be any of your face-to-face students that have a full schedule. They're working adults and they can never come during the day because they only do classes at night, that sort of thing. And so this has really opened that up using that virtual conferencing software for something like that. And of course, bringing it back to that engagement, all of this helps keep students engaged. It helps with retention and that sort of thing for the students.
So here's actually an example from one of the ELIS advisory board meetings that Shaun was discussing. This is actually me on the tablet in the middle of the table. I got to be honorary robot for the day, which was a highlight in my professional career. So the tool you see here is Kubi, which is what Shaun referred to earlier in the conversation. So it's a link, or the name of it is earlier in the chat window. And the man sitting behind me, robot me, is a administrator, faculty member in the School of Medicine. And so he brought in this tool because they were piloting it. And since I was attending via web, as I often did for those Friday meetings, I got to be the honorary robot because it was very easy to log in and do that. So what this allows me to do is, I'm not on wheels yet. I think that capability is with other types of tools like this, but I could control the tilt side to side of the video. And it's pretty incredible how much this changed my sense of presence, because like we've referred to here and there, being able to attend via web is a good step forward, but you still kind of feel like a fly on the wall, like the camera's in the corner of the room. Sometimes you're lucky if someone sees you raising your hand. I'm the type who doesn't mind being loud, so I will be one of the ones who kind of screams from the screen, but a lot of people won't do that. But it's amazing how much more present I felt just by having the camera like right there on the table, as if I had a seat, and people were more aware of my presence because my presence was now associated with movement. So I just thought that was a really interesting experience in thinking about how presence affects your sense of belonging, your sense of inclusion, and your ability to participate in these environments.
I don't know how this video is going to work or look for you because we're streaming this through. So I'm going to just play a little bit of this. If this doesn't work very well, what I'll do is I'll actually post this link in here as well, so you can watch this on your own time too. This will not require you to have a Facebook account. You can just view the video itself there. But I'll just try to run through this real quick. There's me right there. Hey, how you doing? So the iPad that's on this thing is not part of it. You supply your own tablet, but it's that robotic neck. So it's basically just that arm there that's part of it. That's the Kubi device. And I posted in the chat window what's called Double Robot, or Double Robotics makes like a wheels version of it, where you can actually move around into space.
So just to comment a little bit more on the importance, I think, of discussing this issue, because video conferencing, it can seem like that's a very simple topic to discuss. You should use it, get used to using it. But I think by talking about it in all of these contexts, I really encourage us to think about how we can offer that, you know, going back to Lindsay's, or a session I went to earlier and talking about multiple modes as a way to increase access to our faculty development and participation in general, that by simply trying to figure out where you can offer video as often as possible as a way to attend meetings or allow students to attend, it eventually builds a culture where faculty and students will take advantage of it. And I think this committee is a really good example. They just kept offering it, even though maybe one or two videos, two people would attend that way. But now it's often the case where half of your committee member attends that way. And it's not necessarily taking away from on-campus presence, it's just overall increasing how many people are at those meetings in general. Because I know sometimes people have that concern that, oh, you know, people won't come on campus anymore. But I think still providing that choice and trusting our faculty is still a good option to have, and our students in certain contexts as well. Closed captions for these videos, the simple answer is no. We are a campus that is focusing on how to make our web content more accessible. And we're kind of first focusing on those videos that we're recording and polishing and using semester after semester. So these ones that are more time-stamped, time-relevant are we don't have a great captioning option.
Yeah, for anything that's live like this, I know in Zoom is one of the ones, so we're using WebEx right now. We're in the middle of doing an RFP for looking at, and I know Zoom has, I don't remember what it's called. One of my employees was talking to me about this earlier, but there is some services that will do live captioning for these. And that is, it's really tricky to do. Usually they have quite a big price that comes along with it as well. But that is a serious concern that we have, because we do, as Christina was saying, we recommend all our faculty when they're putting up actual, like, just recorded videos they do closed caption on it. It just becomes harder when you're doing it live with these sessions itself. So that's something that we don't have great solutions for it yet, but technology is starting to get out there. Once again, usually there's a pretty big price tag that goes along with it. Want to do a little wrap?
Sure. So we want to make sure there's a little bit of time for us to, open up to ideas of things that have worked well, but also remaining questions you have. But again, just as a point of review, these are kind of our tidy list of 5 reasons why we really all should be using video conferencing, whether we teach fully online or whether we teach fully face-to-face, because even if we're teaching face-to-face, so much of the collaboration we are doing and that we're asking our students to do is done at our own times and places. So really getting people to think about, maybe we should together have a conversation face-to-face, using video conversation to help build understanding. So we think this is really something to think through on a design level of how you can incorporate this and communicating to your students and staff directly on why it is really important, and it's not just a fun tech thing to do.
Right. Here's a lot of the references. Most of these are what Christina had referenced with some of her literature review that we had on there. I believe that we'll be sharing these slides with you afterwards, so we won't keep us up there for very long. But here's our information. If you want to contact us, there's both our email addresses there, and we have roughly 10 minutes left here. So if anyone has any questions or anything they want to share, feel free to turn that over. And I think Daryl can start turning on some mics and webcams if people want to share with us that way as well. Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for attending. How about you? Do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions? Is this going to be captioned?
It will not. It will not be captioned.
I guess just as one extra note that I'll add to this takeaway question about when you're facilitating things with distance and face-to-face audiences, is some of the best practices that we try to implement is to, once in a while invite questions or comments from the online audience, and the chat window is especially helpful for that. Also getting into habits of making sure that that chat window is moderated, if it's by another student or participant or by you. And so just at any point where, and then, another point I wanted to bring up is if you're, depending on where the microphone is and how easy it is to hear everyone, I know at conferences we often ask presenters or people to repeat their questions for the online audience. So whenever you can just do those, a few habits that keeps pulling in that online audience and shows the face-to-face audience that online participation is there and that it matters, I think that those are some good first steps.
Certainly.
All right. Well, now you know where to find us.
Yes.
If you want to reach out or talk about any more examples of what we're doing and trying to do.
Well, thank you all. If there's no more questions, we will see you at some of the other sessions.